It didn't take the Trump administration long to declare its first war, the one it launched against the media.
I am only against the fake news media or press. Fake. They have to lead that word. I'm against the people that make up stories and make up sources. They shouldn't be allowed to use sources unless they use somebody's name.
Last week, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer excluded the New York Times and CNN from a press briefing, two of the outlets that have recently run stories Trump did not like. This came after Spicer demanded to see the cell phones, both government-issued and personal, of his staff to determine if there were any unauthorized calls to the media. Over the weekend, Trump tweeted, "I will not be attending the White House Correspondents Association dinner this year. Please wish everyone well and have a great evening." This will make Trump the first president since Ronald Reagan to skip the annual bash. In 1981, Reagan was recovering from an assassination attempt. Ironically, many believe it was Barack Obama's mocking of Trump at the 2011 event that convinced him to run. Here's what President Obama said last year.
What could he possibly be doing instead? Is he at home eating a Trump steak? Tweeting out insults to Angela Merkel? What's he doing?
Another former president weighed in this morning on Trump's assault on the press.
I consider the media to be indispensable to democracy. That we need an independent media to hold people like me to account. I mean, power can be very addictive, and it can be corrosive.
So why has Trump picked this fight, and what are the consequences as the ante keeps getting raised? Joining me are former CNN White House correspondent Dan Lothian. Hi, Dan. Nice to see you. Freelance journalist Joanna Weiss. Hi, Joanna. And Dan Primack, the business editor at Axios. Congratulations on that new thing there, Dan. Let me start with you. Sure. Most people in the press think Donald Trump is a threat to the press. It's almost become a mantra. Is he? And if he is, what is the threat exactly?
Well, I mean, he's good for the business of the press.
Right.
So let's leave that aside.
Subscriptions up. New York Times, Boston Globe,
clicks
everywhere.
are up. Trump is the only story in town. Whether he's a threat to the media, the question of legitimacy is important, right? You know, the kind of the subtext of what Steve Bannon said at CPAC the other day is this idea that you can kind of create a fact-free universe, right? Leave aside an individual outlet. But if readers in general just don't believe there's anything to trust, then suddenly the kind of the objective truth that we all kind of base, and even policymakers base decisions on, is gone.
So is that it? The delegitimization attempt? Is that what the threat is?
Yeah, no, you have to separate the noise from what's the real threat. And the noise of he's not going to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, okay, whatever. He tweets, you know, everyone...
Alec Baldwin was fine.
Exactly. Every president tries to sort of circumvent the media at times with a different medium. The problem is when we have two alternate realities, and this is something that I feel like has been going on before Trump and Bannon came into power, is this long-term delegitimizing of a lot of the mainstream media. It started with right-wing radio, with Fox, with this idea that they're biased, they can't be trusted, and the seeds have been sown for a long time.
What's interesting is that there is a partisan divide. Here's a Quinnipiac University poll, Dan. Who do you trust more to tell the truth? Republicans, Trump, 78%, Democrats, media, 86%. So has anything really changed with Donald Trump other than the volume being raised?
Right. I think it's the volume that has been raised. But I think, you know, what he's doing is pretty smart. He's essentially creating this label that everyone uses now. You look on social media and everything automatically is fake news. So you can hide behind it. You create a label, and then no matter what happens, he can always dismiss it. If there's a real scandal going on inside his White House or in the country that the U.S. is involved with, if he doesn't agree with it, he can just say, you know what, that's fake news, and people have bought into it and will believe it. It's a wonderful cover for anything that might come along.
But is part of this deal that the press, for the most part, can't stand the guy? I mean, I was reading a piece that James Risen wrote, Pulitzer Prize winner for the New York Times. He's talking about how there were 3 times as many prosecutions of leakers or whistleblowers under Barack Obama as there were in the history of the United States of America. In his piece, he quotes the former executive editor of the Washington Post, Leonard Downey, who talks about the fact that under Barack Obama, there was, quote, more aggressive attempts to control the message and the media. So, I mean, Barack Obama was just doing, we didn't hear all this hand-wringing. You were there.
I was there, and we complained about it. There were times that we wanted to get access to some administration officials, and they would say no, and then the next thing is they're over there with their own sort of morning show type thing with some White House personnel doing an interview, or we wanted to get video of something and they did the video and wanted to feed it to us and we said no. We reported on it. The difference is that when you put all of these things together in this current environment, then everything is magnified. And I think that's the difference from what we saw in the past.
Well, Barack Obama also never said the press is the enemy of the people. I mean, and again,
but he acted like it was his enemy from time to time.
He acted like. I mean, to some degree, the press is the opposition party, and I think the press sees that as its constitutional role. I mean, you're there to be the watchdog. You're there to be a check on power. What Trump does and what Steve Bannon, his chief advisor, does is kind of ratchet it up to this level where they're not just the opposition party, they are the enemy, they are evil, and that's that delegitimizing that I think starts to get dangerous.
There's also a potential downside to what both of you said, which is at some point administrations do need the press. When they have a policy they want to get out and when they want to make the argument for that policy, the press is how they have to make it in part, not exclusively, but in part. If you've delegitimized the messenger, then how does that messenger ever give your message out?
Right. You know, you were there and lived through some of these gaggles. I love the term. Ari Fleischer, former press secretary, obviously for George W., said this is not that unusual. The White House often pick segment. You two can come, you can't come. Now, obviously, it's heightened here, assuming he's even right, and he'll tell me whether it is or not, because CNN and New York Times and the L.A. Times have printed articles he doesn't like. But is it that unusual?
It is not unusual. In fact, President Obama at different times would have these lunches. And some people would be invited and others would not. There was a time when he invited reporters and their significant others, and it was hush-hush. You would get this email. Some people, I don't think anyone from Fox was invited to that. It was just 30 people. And when it got out, people got upset about it, those who weren't invited. So this was happening. We just didn't hear about it at the scale that we see now because, when you put all the pieces together, I think that's what's so shocking about it. It's that it's not just one thing that happens in isolation or every so often. It's just happening all the time. You put it together and it seems like a big deal.
But getting back to this notion that it isn't that unusual, it seems to me the media can only have it one of two ways. They can either acknowledge that this is not that unusual, or if it is unusual, they've got to show a little solidarity. I mean, the other day we saw the Time, and I think the Associated Press said after those other outlets were barred, we're not going to go either. A lot of people said that's what should have happened when Acosta was shut down from your old place a while ago. I mean, why doesn't the press do that and say, if you're not talking to one, just like the mainstream press supported Fox News a couple of years ago when Barack Obama was trying to shut them out.
Well, they're starting to do that. I mean, the Wall Street Journal said, okay, we won't do this if this happens again. On the other hand, honestly, and I've been part of national press pools. If there's one pool reporter at the pool, nobody else really needs to be there. If that person has the duty of, well,
if you're going to argue that you're being excluded in a way that is detrimental to the consumer of the news, then you have to act on it or shut up.
Well, yeah, and you have to understand what your job is. And is your job to be essentially the stenographer of what Sean Spicer is saying, which is something that people need to hear and that one person can do for everyone else, and then you spend the rest of your time doing investigative reporting and taking care of all those leaks that are coming out of the government.
You know, Donald Trump, one of the ironies of this to me, here's Donald Trump talking about loving the First Amendment. I think it was a CPAC.
I love the First Amendment. Nobody loves it better than me. Nobody. I mean, who uses it more than I do?
Part is totally true. That's what the irony to me. I don't know of a politician in my lifetime who is as dependent upon the oxygen provided by the media as this guy, who is elevated to an art form, his alleged, and I think alleged, contempt for the media. I mean, it's likely it's an act, that it's not real. It's a strategic move by him, yes?
He's used to a different media, right? He's used to the New York City tabloid media, which is what he's lived in for 30 years and really lived in for 30 years on all sides of it. I think he's a little bit, honestly, I think he's hurt by this. I think he is hurt by the idea that there are news stories on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, coming out that are negative about him and that he can't control it just by dropping basically a little bit of gossip somewhere.
You're not in agreement. You buy that.
I completely agree. I mean, he has always been in control of his media.
Even if he called under another name in some cases.
He is always in control, and all of a sudden he's up against people who won't listen to him. and he's pushing back. And I think that's the difference. You know, he's not in control of this. And especially to what your point, Dan, is that people within his own White House are providing some of the information, some of the leaks that are fueling some of these stories. It's like, oh no, I can't control them, and I can't control my own people.
By the way, there was reporting this afternoon that he authorized the search of those phones I mentioned by Sean Spicer.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, to your point, he is also an attention hog like we have never seen before. And his press conference that was televised live, I've never seen anyone have more fun at a press conference.
That's 77 minutes
yes,
a week or so.
He was loving it.
Is there anything quickly advice you'd give? I mean, it seems to me this is about as assertive and aggressive as I've seen the press in my lifetime. I mean, the reporting is extraordinarily good. Is there anything they should be doing differently, or this is just the nature of the beast for the next 3 years and 8 and 10 months? You?
Well, we see what the New York Times is doing. They came out with that ad during the Oscars talking about truth and so forth. What I wanted to see, though, is start profiling people from middle America who can talk about, you know, some of the coverage that journalists have done, how they've exposed some things. Use some real people, not, you know, put something out there that the average person who already reads the New York Times.
CNN's doing a lot of that, by the way.
Exactly. I want to see more of that. Go to middle America. Start covering some of these issues outside of the Beltway, and maybe you'll start resonating more with America.
I can't do that. Beyond Newton, I'm in real trouble. Anybody, either of you have a thought for the media quickly?
I mean, to me, the big thing is that there are going to be major policy things. For all the talk about what Trump has or hasn't done, there's two giant issues: healthcare and tax reform, which are coming. Media's going to have to dig into both of those as policy issues.
Maybe as soon as tomorrow night.
Yeah, I would say ignore Twitter. Ignore what he does on Twitter. Keep your eye on the ball.
Couldn't disagree more. We'll have to discuss that now on Twitter.
We will.
Nice to see you, Dan.
Thank you.
John, it's great to see you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. Dang it, you as well.